Hello, today I'm going to show you how to use the Beadliner. First I'll give you an intro to the tool. We have different inserts that we can put into it. The height of the bead is limited by the space between the brass plates. You can screw apart the Beadliner entirely to switch out the inserts. There are a few different ones to adjust for the thickness of the tube you're using. On top I normally start out with the sharp insert to flare the tube at the top. On the bottom we can start with a curved insert that brings the curved edge of the tube closer to the bead. Last we put in the flat insert. This way we can get the flat edge even closer to the bead. Now we can make the beads. We start by making a narrow bead that will fit for a variety of well-known bracelets. The glass needs to be added in a narrow strip. For the decorations, there are a variety of options. I decided to use some fritz. The bead roller is helpful for shaping the beads. It's also useful if you want your beads to be a uniform size. If you want to wear multiple of them on a bracelet, it's nice to have them be the same shape. It's important to form a nice bead channel. It shouldn't be straight on the mandrel, but instead slightly curved. The mandrel guide of this bead roller is 5 mm wide, so the same size as the silver tube I'm going to use later. Here you can see that the transition to the mandrel is slightly curved. This is very important. If it wasn't, the pressure used on the bead channel during the use of the beadliner would shatter the bead. Now we'll show you how to make a bigger bead. There's also a fitting bead roller for this, again with a mandrel guide that's 5 mm wide. This video is shown at double the speed. To figure out the right amount of glass needed for the bead roller, it's easier to use patterns for which you can let the glass flow. This way we can add glass later and still easily fix the pattern. Here it's also important not to fill the mold entirely. It's vital to create a curved bead channel. By rolling the bead in the bead roller, we can see uneven spots and add more glass to even them out. At first we press the glass into the mold a bit, then we can rotate it. This is my finished bead. Now we'll show you how to work with the tool. The bead should have a good curvature, which I hope you can see through the reflection. The tube can cling to this curve through the bead lining process. To start with, we measure the height of the bead. In this case, it's 7.25 millimeters. We add about 3 millimeters to that. If you add any more, then this tube might tear while using the bead liner. I carve a little mark into the tube with my calipers so that I can see where I need to mark it with my pen. This is a tube cutter. We can put the tube into it. We need to be careful to align the marking with the cutting wheel. Now we screw it in, firmly enough that the tube is well held, but won't be dented by the force. Then we can turn it around the tube a few times until we notice that the resistance is letting up, and then add more pressure. Repeat this process until the tube is cut off. It can happen that something slips out of place, but we can just readjust it. It doesn't make any difference for later use. So always rotate a few times and then tighten it. Because it's quite hard to hold on to the tube, one might think that it would be easier to use a vise to hold it, but this should be avoided since this also bears the risk of deforming the tube. Finally, we've cut the tube loose. Now we deburr the edges. To get nice clean edges, we should sand the tube a little. For this I'm using a sandstone with 1000 grain on one side and 3000 grain on the other. The tube now fits into our bead and overlaps a bit on both sides. On the bottom of the beadliner I'm using the curved insert, and on top the sharp insert. It sometimes happens that something slips out of place, but this sadly can't be helped. We need to keep the bead in the middle of the tube. The bead should still be movable. This is a good test for later when we need to see when we should stop tightening. Then we rotate once, remove the bead, and turn it around. Yeah, it really does slip away quite easily sometimes. Now one side is flared, so the bead doesn't slip over the tube anymore. Hold the bead in the middle again so that it's movable and rotate again. Now we unscrew it and turn the bead again. Now we can see that the tube is slightly flared on both ends. I personally find it quite helpful to hold the tool in hand, so that I can look at both the top and bottom at the same time. Rotate it so much that the bead can't slip away. Check if it's still movable, and really carefully, later really only in quarter steps, rotate to get close to the optimal result. Now we switch the insert and use a curved one on top of the beadliner as well. This way we can press the tube a bit closer to the bead without putting too much pressure on the bead channel. But again, be careful. I recommend that you test this out with some simple beads and copper or brass tubes first, that you've got a good feel for the technique. With the smooth edge, we can press the tube even closer to the bead. This is what the finished bead looks like. In the same way, we can prepare the thicker bead. First, we measure the height. Add 3 millimeters to it. Mark it with a pen. Put it into the tube cutter while paying attention to the marking. It should be below the cutting wheel. And now turn and tighten. The video is being shown at double the speed. We do it exactly like we did with the smaller bead. Tighten and turn until the tube comes loose. Now deburr the edges. Sand the tube. There will be some overhang on both sides here as well. Screw the bead liner upwards. Put in the sharp insert. Well, this happens sometimes that something slips. Screw it closed until nothing can slip away. Keep the bead movable, so in the middle of the tube. Turn once. Tighten again. Hold the bead in the middle of the tube again. Turn it once. The sharp insert will flare the tube a little. We need to be careful through this process, since too much pressure on the bead channel will break the bead. Carefully test out how much you can turn. Later use quarter turns until you've reached the optimal firmness. Put in the flat insert to press the flare tube closer to the bead. Finally, put in the straight insert to press the tube as close as possible to the bead. And now we're finished with this bead as well. The Beadliner is very versatile. You can even insert snap buttons with it, but I'll show you that some other time. Thank you for watching and see you next time.